Hey yo, peace. I'm Zo with xoccxi.
So I don't have any idea what the hell I'm doing. Although that is not gonna stop me. We're gonna build a Chevron design pattern table. I got the idea from looking at a DIY by DIY Huntress. While looking at the video, I was checking it out how the table was bordered, the patterning. So what I wanted to do was kind of complicate the thing, switch up the wood designs, use various types of woods. There's some things that I got along the way, and I just kind of implemented everything into this one design just to see how things would turn out. So let's see how that looks.
Right here I took a snapshot of my dining area and how the table would sit in the center. And right there you can see where I grabbed a few things. This here is like I mentioned in the materials in just a second. I grabbed some 4x4 pallets and just started cutting them apart. While cutting them apart, I just realized that gaining these materials is going to be a bit difficult. But here is just a material list that you can check out, just how I got started. Okay. So then I just started with the single measurement of my plywood, dropped it on a reinforced foam board just so I can get a good cut while being spaced on the ground. My saw table is not large enough to cut that board. As you can see here, I just have a standard Ryobi saw table. So I just started setting up the cut just to make sure that I can balance it out, or just get better cutting edges on all sides. After that, I moved down to the floor just to start cutting down my wood for what would be the design on the table. Continues here, you just cut random parts, measure it just to see that it was accurate going all the way around. Now, although it was pretty measured out on one side, that didn't actually say it was measured out all the way through. I came to find out later that there were some inconsistencies in the wood, and I would pay for it later. Just wanted to slow it down just to get the beauty of the sound of the blade. Alright, so start stacking the piles of what will be the wood that goes on top of the table and that will address the table. After that, I went back to the table and decided to lay out what would be the actual tabletop. As you see here, I'm joining two flat plywoods together and I'm using it with the sides that I ripped. At this point here, you can see just how complicated the project is becoming. Although I was determined to make this work regardless of what I actually had to do, cutting down all various sizes of the project and getting everything to fit in the spot. A lot of cutting, a lot of measuring just to see what would actually work. Flip it over and here I am. Right here, of course, I'm using my wood chisel and mallet to take out the nails that were pushed through from the brad nail. I realized I didn't have the goggles on, I needed to be a little bit safer. Still the tabletop up and did the exact same thing. Didn't get snap the nails. I knew I could use some cutters, but I didn't have any money and I didn't feel like running over to the depot to grab them. Dropped the tabletop and decided to start measuring out what the pattern would look like. Didn't really have enough slacks just to go with the standard layout. That way this project would have been done even faster. However, as I said, I started seeing at this point here that my pallet wood was nowhere near the same size and shape that I thought it was. Here, I had to mount my own right angle corners because I didn't cut the original pine to size. I actually cut it undersized, so I had to start angling to fit everything in slot. overhead shot just to show that I started laying out particular patterns. Again, I was going for the Chevron design, but it didn't really fit my liking, so I kind of mixed it up with just a lot of random stuff. As you see, I started even adding in custom cuts and filling in holes right off the bat, adjusting and making anything necessary just so I can get close to what the design and pattern that I wanted to go. I kind of wanted all the arrows to run in various various directions, and it wasn't happening. So I kind of brought it back down to the original idea, and then that's when things started piecing together. Along the way, I had to make all kind of cuts using Brightener to get in there and drop certain things in the spot just so that it'll stick. And then I came back with my tape measure to measure all those specific cuts and angles just to make sure everything would fit well. Here you can see I started using my wood glue and sawdust as filler to go back in and fill those gaps. From there, it was time to cut those edges off. Gotta get the angles, gotta get the sawdust just right. Alright, so I finally made the cuts around all the edges, and this is what I was left with. I was working pretty deep into the day. Right here is a nice shot where I was just using the wood chisel and my sander to pull up the excess glue that was built up on top. I used my heat gun to kind of speed up the process of drying the table, but it only really just burnt the compound of the wood glue and the sawdust. So it took me a little while just to get everything back leveled and up to detail as to how and where I wanted it to be. Falling over until a couple hours into the morning. This is where I was as I was bringing the remaining of the project, or at least this part of the project, to the close. I want to make sure I sand it down particular angles just so when you rub your hand across that table it's very smooth. After fitting on the corners, I began putting on the side panels. Now the side panels was a bit trickier, because what I thought everything would pretty much be leveled out, it really didn't line up that way. So there are a bunch of gaps or parts of the project that stuck out, and I decided like, hey, I can just come back later and just fix this with the sander, or I can chisel it down or something like that, which I eventually ended up doing. Fourth panel on. After that, came back in, started sanding. As you see, there's a gap right there. That gap I could not correct, and I didn't want to go back and do any custom cutting. So here, I just basically laid out and cover up the edges where the trim was, and then just kind of went in with the different color, the two colors of stain. I didn't want to get down to the specifics just because this project was running over the time that I really cut out for it, and it was time for it to get done. Right here, I started cutting the legs. All direct cuts first. Then I moved over to the actual 90s for where I had started lining all the legs up. Alright, let's put these legs together. So I framed them just to see if everything would work. Everything looked great. Used Brad Miller to start getting things started. At that point, I came back in with the drill and just started putting screws down into the legs. This way I can actually stabilize them. As you see here, I'm laying masking tape down so I can go ahead and set the pattern that I had in mind. I was using the wood chisel to make my cuts just because it was sharp, but I was being lazy. I didn't want to go in the house and wake my daughter up, so I couldn't get my X-Acto knife just at that moment, although I have it now. Then I went back into the other leg and started trimming up what the wood chisel had kind of left as a rough design. After trimming it up here, I'm laying down the stain on what would be the leg, coming back behind it with my heat gun just to kind of speed up the drying process. I'm still in the morning, the early morning hours. The sun isn't just out just yet, and especially not opening. But as you see, it's definitely coming in. Flip it over. Let's keep staining. Let's keep drying. The heat gun didn't actually speed up the process all the way, so there was still wait time. Here, I just come back in, I'm laying my coats down just to protect my tabletop because I know two things. My daughter's gonna dance on top of it and she's gonna throw things at it. Went back later just to catch the legs. Started going over everything on the legs. Make sure I get all the sides, all the angles. Next leg, same thing. Then I brought everything into the house. Started shotting it up. Daughter's running around. She wanted to help me. I said, sure thing. But when the drill comes out, she gone. Alright, and here we are. Couple shots of the table after everything.
Alright, so we arrived at the final product, and this baby's done. So as you've seen along the video, there's a lot of imperfections, but again, this is my second project for woodworking. Built the table, got it up to specs. It works. Everything is great. It's gonna be our floor table, dining table for a little bit until I come up with the concept for the next one. And I learned a lot doing this one. So, see you guys next time.